firstly, I'd like to start by talking about my role, who I am and what I do and who I work for. So my name is Suzie Rollins. I'm the Welfare Benefits Coordinator and I work for the London Borough of Merton. I manage the Welfare Benefits Service and also the local welfare support scheme. Now, the Welfare Benefits Service has been active for quite a few years. Some of you may already be aware of our service and how we try and help people, I'm not sure. But today I'm talking about some of the welfare benefit changes which have been around for quite a while now. But just to familiarise you all, I will be talking about universal credit, universal credit, personal independence payment, and the council tax support, as well as possibly covering some other benefits like carers allowance. So if I start by talking about universal credit. Universal credit, it's a single benefit designed to be a one-fits-all approach, which, you know, has been in place since October 2013. And currently the government drive is for anyone who needs to access benefits for the first time or because of a change in their circumstances, they have no choice but to apply for universal credit. It literally replaces 6 benefits, so known as the legacy benefits, for example, employment and support allowance, housing benefits, job seekers allowance and income support, child tax credit and working tax credit. Now, the whole idea of this is designed to be a financial incentive for work, and it's supposedly offering support for people to either actively look for work, increase their working hours, or to embark on a work-related activity of some kind. Now, in my dealings with universal credit, unfortunately, their ethos is they will only deal with the applicant. They do not welcome any representatives unless you are the actual DWP appointee for the applicant. And even that can offer some complications because they had to incorporate and add on the DWP appointeeship at a later date because unfortunately they neglected to include it in the original change under the universal credit, technical package, so to speak. So for those of you who are DWP appointees, you may find there are some problems with making sure they understand what your role is and how you're there to represent the person you care for. Now, universal credit is made up of a very basic amount paid monthly. And if you are a person with children, the maximum they'll pay for are 2 children, no more than that. Because again, that's part of the welfare reform and it's part of saving monies where they can. Now, the whole point of universal credit, as I said, it's supposed to provide a financial incentive to work or to return to work. Unfortunately, for the majority of clients that I deal with who happen to have disabilities, mental health problems and other vulnerabilities, the whole concept of universal credit can be quite challenging. For a start, you have to apply for it online. You can do a telephone claim, albeit they always encourage you to revert to online facilities. And for anyone that's vulnerable, this can be quite challenging. Lately, since the introduction of universal credit, I found myself having to embark on completing an online claim for persons, and this can take some time, anything from 1 hour in one day right through to a couple of weeks to sort out and resolve, unfortunately, because of the complications attached to the online facility. Now, I would urge anybody that's representing a vulnerable person to make sure you are fully aware of universal credit's actual layout. there is thankfully on their website a very clear guideline so that you can see a step-by-step guide as to how it's set up, how to make a claim, and also how to try and make sure you secure payments and so on. I have to admit their website is quite useful, but again, for those who are absolutely 100% capable of online facilities, accessing online facilities. Now, I would honestly say that with Universal Credit, there is an automatic natural progression to becoming, you get paid a month in arrears. So if the person's liable to pay rent, they will literally have 1 month's rent arrears from the very beginning. Universal Credit do not allow for any flexibility regarding payment of rent in advance or anything like that, unfortunately. So you have to be prepared for any underlying debt from the very beginning. You have the right to access a budget in advance for Universal Credit, which was previously known as the crisis loan. However, the person will be expected to repay this money and deductions will be made immediately from their Universal Credit Entitlement Award. All I can say is for anybody that has to deal with Universal Credit, it's very important that you represent your person, the person that you're caring for, to the best of your ability. And I would always urge you to try, if you do not have it already, try and sort out DWP appointeeship. I will send some information about DWP appointeeship in addition to all the other information I'll be discussing today, for those of you who are not aware of what this means. Okay, now moving on, I will now talk about personal independence payment. Again, this was a new benefit introduced from April 2013, and its whole purpose is to replace disability living allowance for the severely ill and or disabled persons aged between 16 to 64. Personal independence payment, or PIP as we call it, is still a non-means tested tax-free payment that the recipient can choose to spend as they wish to support their illness and or disability. At the moment, I would say I have on average completed at least, I think I complete at least 5 to 10 PIP forms every week since the very beginning, and my success rate has been quite good. I think for every 10 applications, I've got a successful outcome in at least 7 of them, which is, you know, I'm very proud of that fact. And I think it's just to know that there is a certain approach that you need to take when it comes to applying for personal independence payment. It's very different to disability living allowance. It's very much about, okay, sorry, if I can see there's a question. I do apologise. All questions have to be presented at the end as we're doing a Q&A at the end. So thank you very much. Right, so PIP, it's made up of 2 components. You have the mobility component and you have the daily living component. Both components have 2 rates, one known as standard and the other known as enhanced. Now, for PIP, it's basically only paid for fixed periods. They no longer have the indefinite award unless there's an exceptional circumstance, such as the person has been diagnosed with a terminal condition and has less than 6 months to live, and they have a DS 1500 to support that fact, which they need to present to the PIP unit. Now, regarding the actual process, it's made up of points. It's driven by points. The person has to make a telephone application to complete part 1, known as PIP 1, and that will take approximately 20 minutes to conduct. I urge the person to make sure they have a representative with them to support them at all times regarding this process, because it's quite in-depth, and they do ask what I perceive to be complex questions when it comes to the telephone call. Followed on from that, they will then release part 2, known as PIP 2, which usually about 44 pages long, and it's the form that I complete for people if they need it, if they need my help. If they don't need my help, I'm happy to send tips of how to complete the form as such. Now, regarding this process, you know, the actual form, once it's completed, you then have to send it off and wait for at least 6 to 8 weeks pre-COVID. Now, during COVID, it's more like 12 to 16 weeks. You have to wait for a medical assessment invitation, and you have to participate in this medical assessment questionnaire or interview, usually done face-to-face, but at the moment, because of COVID, it is being conducted over the telephone. And this interview is arranged by the medical provider, and they allocate a healthcare professional to interview the applicant, and depending on the applicant's answers, that is what will establish how many points are allocated and whether or not they're actually entitled to personal independence payment. You have to score at least 8 points for each component. If you score below 8 points, you simply don't qualify for PIP. Of course, you have the right to ask for a mandatory reconsideration. I'm involved in, I've got 4 mandatory reconsiderations on the go right now, actually. And if you are refused a mandatory reconsideration, if it's not overturned, then you have the right to appeal. From a professional point of view, I'm involved in 4 appeals as well at the moment. Now, it's quite a long drawn out process because of COVID again. The appeals are being heard, on average, the waiting time is anything between 9 to 12 months at the moment for an appeal. So crucially, I would urge you to make sure that the PIP form is completed to the best of your ability in the first place to try and get a good outcome. Now, the PIP form, you have a deadline. It's driven by a deadline. And I always remind people, you do have the right to ask for an extension. In particular, if you do decide to access my service for help to complete the PIP2 form for the applicant on behalf of the applicant, please understand, because I'm very much working alone at the moment, I'm under a lot of pressure regarding the time frame. So I would always say to you, I can get an extension, so please don't worry. If you are happy for me to take over, I'm happy to call the PIP unit and ask for an extension on your behalf, and I do get the extensions. Historically, I've actually been allowed up to 4 extensions on any individual PIP form. Now, if I could just confirm that if you have any persons in receipt of employment and support allowance, the legacy benefit as we call it, if they are awarded PIP, on the positive side, they may be entitled to an extra increase in their ESA payment if nobody's in receipt of carer's allowance. And I mean, with PIP, I mean, in recent years, I think within the past year or two, they have had to make some amendments to their mental health decisions, because it's been proven that their mental health decisions have not been very good, and they've had to address that. And thankfully, there are now in place some new legislation regarding that. If you'd like some more information about that, I will try and see if I can find it. I would appreciate if anyone who wants it could let me know in the Q&A at the end. Now, moving on, I wish to talk about carer's allowance next. Now, carer's allowance is a taxable benefit made payable to the person caring for the recipient in receipt of DLA or PIP. They have to be in receipt of a certain amount of DLA or PIP in order for you to qualify for carer's allowance. It's a standard amount of around £67 at the moment. You just have to make sure, to qualify, you have to make sure you can demonstrate you're available to care for the person for at least 35 hours per week. And so in other words, you cannot be in full-time education or full-time work. If you are any type of work, you cannot be earning more than £128 per week. Carer's allowance is quite a straightforward application. I would say you can do it online, which is the easiest approach, or you can telephone the Carers Allowance Unit to ask for the form to be sent to you. You fill it out, you send it back, and they make a decision. Their processing time is currently anything between 4 to 6 weeks. So they're not too bad, not as bad as some of the other parts of the DWP service. Overall, I would always urge someone to apply for carers allowance if they are caring for that person on average for at least, you know, the week or as well as the weekends and things like that, because, and if they are not in full-time work or full-time education, because it represents an additional amount of money for you as the carer. I mean, basically, it is quite a straightforward facility, and also it allows you for national insurance credits towards your state pension once you reach retirement age. And I think that's it for those two. Let me talk about our other team, our other organisation that I also manage, which is the Local Welfare Support Scheme. The Local Welfare Support Scheme has taken on emergency payments and resettlement grants, and I'm responsible for making those decisions. Anyone that's been, well, anyone that's experiencing a financial crisis, such as a disruption to their benefit, or they are waiting for their benefit to be processed and they're left with no money in the meantime, and they have no access or any other resource to money. We would consider an application for an emergency payment. It's strictly done by telephone, and we would ask for all information to be emailed to us to support the application, as it is a grant, not a loan, so you're not paying any money back. We also offer a resettlement grant, so that's for someone who's perhaps been offered a tenancy for the first time, or they're moving to a larger city, and we would consider an application based on the fact that the London Borough of Merton has been involved in getting them housed or rehoused, and they in turn need some essential household items. And again, it's a grant, not a loan. We also consider an application for replacing one essential household item. If you are currently renting or you own in the property in the borough, and your household item has broken down and is beyond repair, we would consider replacing it. Again, it's a grant, not a loan. And we use AO.com and Argos for all purchases. We are responsible for the purchase, and we are responsible for negotiating delivery dates with the applicant. And yeah, that service is, as I said, strictly a telephone service. It runs from 11 a.m. till 3 p.m. And overall, in conclusion, we are a tiny team. I mean, I'm currently working alone, as I said, regarding the welfare benefits service. But for Local Welfare Support Scheme, you have myself as manager and my officer, Sophie Thomas, who also usually works with me under the welfare benefits service, but unfortunately, she's been taken away to do other duties at the moment. I'm hoping she'll be returned to me by the 1st of April. I think that's it for now. I'm happy to welcome any questions now.